Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special bonus episode of the Spoiler Warning podcast. We were talking about a number of award-winning films from this year's Sundance Film Festival. I'm Christopher Schnese.
I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week on the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a streaming platform near you. We are going to return to doing that soon. But yes, Sundance Film Festival just ended, and as we had mentioned on the previous episode, Stephen and I got a package of being able to gain access to 4 films a day during the reruns of the award-winning films. We probably could have just bought individual tickets, but whatever. This at least gave us a finite selection of films to talk about.
Yeah, and it only cost $140 more than the other avenue. And I only watched 5 of them. 6, 5. I definitely could have saved some money.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, in all fairness, you still would have bought the ones that you didn't see. You just didn't get around to watching them. So
yep.
It's not like you would have saved all the money that in your head right now you're thinking about. You just would have saved way more than we did.
Right. And who knows what stress I would have felt in the days leading up to the awards announcement if I didn't have an awards pass and I didn't know that anyone was going to be able to book whatever the hell they wanted.
Yeah.
I would have been so stressed out.
And to be fair, we don't really know. Well, here's the thing that we missed out on is if we were buying individual tickets, we could have not thought about it and bought them all for Saturday since you had 2 days to watch it instead of being stuck into the window of shit. Did I favorite things that are also on Sunday and not on Saturday and trying to figure out how to like quickly get in and hope nothing sells out. We didn't have any problems. Nothing seemed to sell out, but we were done pretty quickly. So for all we know, everything sold out like 2 minutes after we were done.
Yeah.
One click buying our tickets, but
like I bet After Yang sold out, though I didn't go back to check, but it seems like it would have.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, what did you think of this version of doing the festival compared to what we tried to pull last year at all the festivals, Stephen?
I mean, it's night and day, mainly because I was still shell-shocked enough from last year's festival that I never even tried to fully invest myself this year in the idea of last year. I think I maxed out at 7 in a day, and I think you pulled off 8 in one of the days or something.
I think
I remember that. This year, I didn't even come close, right? I was stressed about the weekend because I was like, oh, I have all these Sundance movies to watch, but I also have like plans with my wife, and I also have like an exercise routine I wanted to do, and I have a work thing that I said I was going to get done. And in my head, I was like, this is going to be a nightmare. And I just didn't let it be a nightmare, which is why as we go through this, you are going to have more than me to talk about, because I basically failed immediately. In day one, I already was like, okay, there are 4 movies I have available today. 3 is plenty. I'll do 3 and then see how I feel.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so I feel fine. I don't feel like I attended a festival. I feel like I got a bunch of PVOD things and maybe crammed for the podcast in a way we normally would have if like 6 things showed up that we really wanted to review in a weekend or something.
Yeah. I think for me, when I looked at it, I was like, 4 a day, that is chump change. They start at 7 a.m. and they're all less than 2 hours. You can do 2 in the morning. You have several hours of break, and then you can do like 1 in the afternoon and then 1 after dinner. But yeah, figuring out timing with just, eating, doing everything, and, being mobile for at least a little while and not be like stuck there. And then, sometimes you get tired and you might need a nap.
Yep.
That changes the math as well. But yeah, it was definitely nice to have more constraint on what we were trying to fit in. But also the downside is that we like resigned ourselves to like, well, we'll get the awards package and we'll watch things that the jury / the audience said were great. They aren't necessarily things that like we would have bought tickets. Like some of them are definitely for sure things that we already intended to buy a ticket to if we weren't already spending up too much on a package for later. But like when you're sitting into that thing, you're like, all right, everybody says this is good. I haven't read anything. I'm just adding it to the list because it's supposed to be good. It puts you in a different frame of mind than, oh my God, this story sounds amazing. I really want to see this.
Right. It makes the feeling of discovery a little less, right? Because you're already getting a thing people, quote, discovered. You're getting things that people have already been buzzing about, which is very different than like I was thinking, because I was making out like a written 2021 list, and I included The Fallout, which was a movie that in South by Southwest, I felt like it was this total little gem of a discovery. Like no one has ever heard of this thing. And I really love this lead actress. This is great.
Yeah.
And it turns out like a few weeks ago, The Fallout premiered on like HBO or something, and it's
I think
like
it was literally this past
on
weekend or something.
Oh, this week?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like trending on the internet now, and it's funny how different the discovery feels compared to just a movie that came out.
Yeah.
Doing the awards package at Sundance feels more like it's a movie that came out, and like I got early dibs to it, but you don't get the same like thrill of finding something.
Yeah, it's kind of like that year at Toronto when we saw that little tiny film called The Joker. No, I kid.
Did that ever get picked up by anybody?
I mean, even that time, though, that had like literally won a bunch of other festivals before we got to see it. But I do like the idea of like, treating that
I think like Joker, Marriage Story, Uncut Gems, and Jojo Rabbit, all of those at TIFF that year, I wouldn't have felt were a discovery anyway. Those were like, hell yeah, I'm getting to see the big movies before everybody else.
Yeah, for sure. I just like the idea of somebody who doesn't pay attention to the internet or anything and is like, oh, they're doing another Joker movie?
Yeah. But like Mass, for instance, was a discovery.
Oh, yeah,
right?
for sure.
Or Saloom was a discovery. That feeling is like you really have to like decide to take a chance on a thing and then be surprised. And a jury just kind of screws that for you.
Yeah. The other weird thing about this is if you're sitting down to watch an award-winning film or a jury-selected film or an audience favorite film and you don't like it halfway through, you're just like, man, I guess I just hate cinema.
Yeah, I don't know, though. I mean, I feel like with a lot of festivals, when I see this is not me speaking to the quality of the award-winning films this year, but in like past festivals, when I see what won, sometimes things that I saw and didn't care about at all win an award. And it's like, okay, I don't know, different strokes for different folks. Yeah. I don't feel any kind of fraudulence or whatever when I'm sitting and I like don't enjoy a movie that won like world drama prize named after someone, right? Like who knows what their criteria is for picking a certain movie.
Well, what do you say, Steve, when we get into the list?
Let's do it.
All right. So first up on the list, we're just going to hit this in alphabetical order and run through these. First on the list is a little film called 892, which is the story of a vet who has been screwed out of his one of his payments that he's supposed to get from the vet for having served, and he isn't able to get anybody to help him, so he decides to hold up a bank in order to bring attention to what's going on with him and try to get justice served in his sense of the idea. And this is a film that is based on a true story, and it is essentially very small. I mean, obviously there's tons of people involved in the overall story, but it's really just a film that features kind of four characters, really. It's the man the story's based on, holding up the bank. It's two tellers who work at the bank, and it is a negotiator who was brought in to talk over the situation and try to de-escalate what's happening. And I thought this film was fine. Like it was a film that at least, for obvious reasons, it's a hostage basically standoff. The tensions are going to be high. You're watching a person who is going through something, and you're on his side as far as like him wanting to see things work out. But it's definitely things are revealed, maybe even in the title of the film, that kind of set an interesting tone for what is happening and the stakes behind it, and why somebody would go to the lengths that they are going. One thing I kind of didn't like about what this film is doing is it feels like it's sort of message film that's calling attention to something that happened and an injustice that was happening to a person, but it also sort of has a few scenes of dialogue that call into question the mental state of the character that it's focusing on. And I don't really understand why that choice was given, because it's sort of, you're taking a character who you're supposed to feel, you're supposed to be on their side, not that you want them to hold up a bank, but you feel that something bad happened to them, and you see that there is this injustice in the world that this person has fallen victim to, but then you make a decision to paint the character in a certain light that may call into question whether he's like, I don't know, there's something that made me a little uncomfortable about what the film was trying to do, like playing both sides of the field of was this person in the right frame of mind when they tried to solve a problem they had, versus was this person really just at their wits' end and down on their luck, and sort of this is a bad way they chose to try to deal with that situation. So I don't know. What do you think, Stephen?
I think I largely agree with you. It sounds like you, like me, maybe went into the movie not knowing that it was based on a true story. My experience was, it was roughly around the time you were mentioning where something clicked, where I felt, this must be based on a true story, because you would not intentionally plot some of these things, to be the way that they are. I thought it was fairly good. I'm going to nudge it above fine. I think there are some things that I think work very well. I think John Boyega's performance is very good in the movie. He really inhabits this character, and especially when you see photos of the real person too, he seems to do a very good job of kind of having the actual look and the behavioral aspects. I had read an article about him afterwards, so I learned a little bit about the real person, Brian Brown Easley. So I think he was really good. Michael K. Williams, it was great to see him in this. I don't know if this is his final role or if he's in something else or not too, but I think he brought a lot of kind of humanity and nuance to the character that he plays in the movie as well. And they are kind of the two, in terms of a relationship formed, I think they're kind of the two key counterpoints in the movie. So I think they do a good job of holding it together. I did think the pacing of the movie was odd. It was, it's a hostage situation, but it quickly becomes clear that it is not going to be like Inside Man or anything. It isn't going to be some kind of nonstop adrenaline movie. It kind of is, it pivots into being a movie about raising awareness for social things. It honestly reminded me a little bit of Money Monster, in the sense that it is a hostage story, but that it's really the person who is committing this is actually trying to amplify something terrible that happened in the world.
And the interesting thing about that comparison, though, is that, both characters are motivated by a similar thing, and both characters have the same goal in the actions they are taking to take something hostage. But in this film, he takes over the bank so that news cameras will come, so that he can deliver a message to people. His end goal is, put me in front of a camera so I can say my piece. In Money Monster, they cut out the middleman being the bank, and just go to a news organization and take that over. And that's sort of I don't know how one-to-one this relates to the real life story that happened. And what the mindset of the real life man was at the time. But it just feels like this film is playing in a genre of hostage standoff films, but is not executing on how those would play out, because it's playing this by the book thing that happened in real life. And it feels like it's sacrificing the logical nature of a hostage standoff and what your end goal is in service of what actually happened in real life. I
agree with that. I think that's what the movie wants to do, but it does make the tone conflict with itself a little bit. I think the movie wants to begin as a traditional hostage situation where you're like, all right, he's a man with a plan. He's going to be deft at what he is doing. He's going to have all these things laid out. It's going to escalate. It's going to be great. Or at least it's going to be like Dog Day Afternoon or something. It's going to be like he has a plan and maybe it's going to get exhausting, but it's still like, it's about how exhausting it is. But instead, because of the true story, which he was very, very, very closely to, it is kind of the story of a hostage-taking situation where even the response to that situation proves just how little weight is being given to these people by, you know, the mechanisms of society that he thinks are going to leap in and do something. How they respond, that like deflated pivot away from the hostage tension into something else is, I think it's by design, but it also makes it feel a little bit slow and a little bit aimless in the middle sections, in a way that I thought was just okay. But I did read, it's based on an article called, and not only is, oh God, you're right, I shouldn't actually say the name. So it's based on a real article, which the movie kind of mentions in the closing credits. And when you read the article, not just the main character, Brian, but pretty much everyone around him are directly quoted in the article, and many lines of dialogue are specifically mentioned in the article too. So I think it does try to hew very, very closely. Okay. For better or worse. I think maybe for worse if you're talking about narrative fiction, but that at least explained its machinations to me.
Cool. Well, why don't you take us on into the next one?
All right. The next one is the movie After Yang. This is Kogonada's follow-up to Columbus, which is a movie that I believe we both enjoyed. I don't actually remember how you felt about Columbus.
Yeah, I mean, I think you praised it way more than I did, but I also enjoyed it.
Yeah. So After Yang is basically a sci-fi set in a near future of sorts that I honestly didn't know anything when I went into this movie, so I don't even know how much to say about it. It's set in a near future where
it's like the premise is established basically in the first like 5 minutes. So I think that's not a spoiler.
Yeah, you're right. So robots or AIs basically walk among us in this future, and in this case, there's a family that had a robot named Yang that they had kind of act as an older brother to their adopted daughter, and they're grappling with his death and what that means for the family. So they're thinking through their memories. What did it mean? What was their connection to him? And it just kind of becomes a rumination on all sorts of things, both sci-fi and not. I thought this movie, I thought it was beautiful. I really, really enjoyed it in the brain tickling sense. And I found it way more difficult to connect to than I expected, given how kind of, I mean, Columbus was definitely very focused on composition, like this movie is. Like certain scenes, you just look at the frame and you're like, okay, I totally get why he wanted that to be his like desktop background. You know, there's always like a foreground and a background and something happening in the middle and interesting reflections. And Kogonada is clearly very interested in this stuff. But Columbus grounded all that in a very, I would say, like conventional indie drama in terms of what it was about. You know, aimless people finding each other. Whereas this movie, as a sci-fi, is it is much more wild and unexpected. Like the tone, it keeps that somber tone of like a soulful drama, even as the world that it is depicting is like very strange and difficult to inhabit. I think what impressed me is how totally thoroughly he has created this world. Like it feels like he just went to another planet and said, okay, we're going to film on location. Because the look and feel is just like completely thought through. Like everything from the way interior designs of houses look, the outfits people wear, the way plants look, the way people communicate with each other, the way technology interacts with things. He has just created this whole universe that is all one big look and feel, you know, and mood. What's strange to me, and I haven't figured it out yet, is on one hand, this is a movie that has by design, ways of just making me cry, right? It is a movie about memory and about human connection and about the kind of like collage-y ways you can look back on a life and see what you find, you know, when you synthesize a bunch of moments together. But it takes that like rhythm of making you cry, and it does things a few times that I think I know why it does it, but it like intentionally breaks up the dialogue with like overlapping like repetition, and it twists certain lines and it changes the angle of approach in a way that makes it be about like the unreliability of memory, or maybe the way you revise your memories in your head. But the effect of that was totally removing me from that impulse of wanting to cry. Like it took away the rhythm of this is breaking my heart, and it made me be like, interesting, what is he doing here? And that is kind of where this movie left me. Like I didn't fall in love with it because it wanted to be too prickly for me to fall in love with. Like it wanted to make it harder on me. And I don't know what that means.
I'm picturing you right now with the glasses on and a little girl asking if the movie's boring you to tears.
Like, I think I respect it because I think it's stuck in my head way longer because of these interesting wrinkles Kogonada threw in it. But it wasn't the, you know, straight down the middle bola like strike or whatever that I thought it was going to be. It was much more wanting to make me uncomfortable, and add to that the world that he creates, I think again by design, the humans are very emotional, compassionate. They open up to robots and other things. The way they talk to each other is very stilted and distant and devoid of emotion and removed. And that was also strange. Like, I don't know exactly what he's saying. It's the kind of movie that makes me want to go back and figure out why he made the choices he made, but it isn't a movie that made me just fall in love and want to rave about this is the meaning of life or anything like that.
Yeah. So I think accidentally, I technically may have watched this film in the exact way you're supposed to watch it, which is broken into pieces, all overlapping. So I have from start to end, I have watched this film a single time all the way through, but I have watched the first 75% another time and then about 50% another time. So some of these scenes where it's like the same scene happening multiple times repeated on top of each other, it's like my third time watching it. It's like I'm just like, all right, this time I actually really like it. First of all, zero of all. It should be stated that this film, when it played at the festival, opened with the A24 logo. This is already slated to be released the first week of March. That may be only theaters, like 3 theaters or whatever it turns out to be. It will more than likely be available in the A24 screening room. So we will do a full review that we can talk spoilers and stuff later on.
I may rewatch it then too, just to get the same Schnese impression.
So that should be stated up front. But yeah, I think that this film is incredibly compelling, and one of it can be confusing because as you said, like half the dialogue in this film is people talking over future FaceTime. But the way future FaceTime works is you stare into a void. It's not quite clear what other people around you see, but you're looking. Who's the documentary film person who shoots the people shooting directly into the camera?
Errol Morris.
Yeah. So they're doing, like, every phone call that takes place is shot that way, where somebody's looking directly through a space. They are either standing or sitting in an area where it feels like they're the only thing in the room, yet there is still a room around them. There's like this very interesting thing. Most of the dialogue in this film, I don't know if you were watching in headphones or watching out loud.
No, Joanne and I watched together.
The mix feels like sometimes dialogue feels like a God voice sort of thing, where it's like you hear it all around you. It's not coming from the character. So it's like phone calls that are video, phone calls that are audio, sometimes just conversations. There's this otherness to all interaction where, like, because this film introduces the idea of techno-sapiens and cultural techno-sapiens, which we'll get to in a second, which is another incredibly wild thing that this film is like, this world exists in. But like, there were times where I was like, is the wife a techno-sapien? Like, because her delivery of most of her dialogue feels incredibly robotic at times. Not like, and I don't say that to mean that she is potentially acting. Like, it feels like a conscious choice. Like, she is this sort of ethereal being feeling to me when I see, like, when she talks a lot of the times when she's talking to her daughter and stuff like that. And it's there was like a strangeness to what was going on, but this world was just incredible to me. The idea that like how it's playing in the space of future AI robots, but also where the robots come from, and like Chinese the Chinese technology landscape of our current time, and like this idea of like, you know, we can't have all the 5G chips come from China because, you know, that could be a problem.
Right, the same like, conspiracy theories, and that was an interesting plot line. Yeah,
like it was super interesting, like the super racist tech who works on robots, and just the idea of a world where people can be fine purchasing and having a synthetic humanoid robot in their home and treating it as a child, but would be genetist against clones. Like there's just it's a really interesting dynamic this world is putting together, and just the way it plays with talking about technology, where technology comes from, IP law, all these different things. Like I found the journey of watching this film incredible, just like playing in all these different things and like trying to figure out where things were going. And then on top of that, once you sort of learn more about Yang and who he was, and like I just found it a really sweet and interesting story that on some levels kind of stays one level throughout the whole film. It's not a gradual thing that ends in this giant crescendo. It's really all sort of like monotone emotionally, but there's still, it's almost like, I think maybe the reason you were saying that like it tries to beat me away from feeling the cries that I could have felt, it's because it feels like it's intellectually overpowering the emotional side of things. It's like a film that's like, it's like Spock, right? It's like he's so intellectual that he can't be bothered to have emotion, and the film does that to you because it's stimulating your brain too much for your heart to overpower things.
I agree, and I think what intrigued me about this movie is the reviews that I saw, you know, leading into it, because it premiered at Cannes too. People had seen it before. Every review I saw was acting like this was just a direct, tear-jerky, a soulful meditation on memory and what it means to be connected. You know, all my shit, like 100%. And after I watched it, I wanted to say, yes, it was all that, but did you all not see all the ways he's like intentionally making me not emotionally resonate? Like I feel like the movie, like you said, it is making us feel the way the characters in the movie feel, and it's doing that very intentionally. And I think it is so interesting and rich and compelling, and also just not the way people are describing it. That's how I felt.
Yeah. Cool. So should we move on to Blood? All right, so Blood is a film that I think is one of the ones that Stephen ended up missing, which is unfortunate because now I'm going to have to talk about a film that I did not care for, and there's no one to back up the film on this podcast. But Blood is basically the story of a woman who whose husband has passed away, I believe, and she decides to go on a trip to Japan and sort of tour around the city photographing people who work on various things, and it's sort of just her time maybe escaping. I don't know. It's hard for me to describe this film because for me, it sort of felt a little aimless, and it was hard for me to pay attention to the moment to moment of what was going on, because it felt like this is less about a narrative through line that is happening and more about just the literal beat to beat moment of this woman traveling around and seeing other people just do their jobs that aren't particularly like part of the point is this person is good at this one job that nobody really cares and sees about, and she photographs it, right? I'm probably like leaning too heavily on this one thing because it's the only thing I can really say about what is happening in the film. But yeah, for me, it was what I was joking earlier about, like, I guess I just don't like filmic stuff because I'm sure everybody is in love with this. The one thing we haven't been saying is what awards these films won, but Blood got the U.S. Dramatic Special Jury Award. So that is, that was Blood. Obviously, it's getting some praise. That praise does not come from me, and I'm sorry.
Well, I just want to say how disappointed I am in Christopher. This was a wonderful, soul-stirring movie. I'm sure I will say after I watch it, just like a year and a half from now. So I'm here to talk about a movie that we already talked about before, which is Cha Cha Real Smooth. This was the one film we both did catch in the festival proper. We didn't wait for it to win an award. It turns out it won a big one. It won the U.S. Audience Award for dramatic film. The audience...
The awards are written in a way that they're not complete sentences, and it's really hard to be able to say them properly sometimes.
Yeah, he won the Audience Award in the U.S. Dramatic category. That's how we would say it. We spoke at length about this already. It is a completely lovely, heartwarming movie. The follow-up of Shithouse by Cooper Raiff, about a person who recently graduated college and is feeling that kind of, that aimlessness, the postgraduate aimlessness that Zach Braff so trafficked in, in his movies as well. And in that aimless search to see what he should do next, he becomes a party starter for a series of bar mitzvahs in his hometown. And he, in the process, he charms a bunch of people. He makes some friends, most notably a woman whose name I forget in the movie now. I forget the character's name, and her daughter Lola, her daughter Lola, who is autistic. And the main character that Cooper Raiff plays kind of forms a different relationship with both of them. He finds a connection there, and he sort of embeds himself in this family, and plot ensues. What I found very moving about this movie is just how heart on your sleeve earnest everyone in the film is, all orbiting the gravity of Cooper Raiff's character, who kind of just tells it like it is. He's very wide-eyed. He cries when he wants to cry. He tells you how he feels. He asks you difficult, direct questions. And everyone in the movie speaks very openly about their feelings in turn. They're just sharing things together. And I found it just very charming and moving, like this kind of heightened, I see it as a heightened reality a little bit of just how open everyone is to each other. And I think it's a world that I want to live in, and it has a lot of wisdom that I would not expect a 23-year-old to have been able to write, film, and star in. It seems like the kind of thing that you would be 50 then looking back at what your 20s meant, not living in your 20s in the moment and coming up with all this. So I think it deserves all the praise that it's been getting.
Yeah, there's a scene that takes place on a doorstep where the emotional intelligence on display is what a future, as you said, like a 50-year-old would remember back to that moment and go like, oh, that's what this meant.
Yeah, what I should have said.
Yeah, exactly. But instead, this character is able to say those type of things in the moment and understand like everybody's emotional state and what it means to be existing in these spaces with other people and to work together on just all doing your life and figuring out what's going on. We did, as Stephen said, we already released a review strictly of this film. What we didn't know at the time, because it wasn't announced yet, is that this film was picked up by Apple, and this will eventually make its way to Apple TV Plus. But yeah, this is this year's Coda, essentially, and Apple bought it for $15 million. So yay to Cooper Raiff and the rest of the folks that worked on this film.
Cooper Raiff and that Wordle guy need to go on a vacation together.
But yeah, I love the film, and I can't wait to see what he does next. Stephen, do we think, or I should say, do we agree, the next film has to be fatherhood, right?
Ooh, I mean, it depends how long he waits to make another movie.
Fatherhood or trying to conceive, sort of like potential fatherhood. Will they? Won't they? Maybe an abortion film.
I think he's going to take it slow. I think the next film is going to be like marriage or something. It's like he's in a relationship, but he can't commit all the way, or he's struggling to figure out what it means to
smash those two lines together. It could be a.
You've got the last kiss, baby. You're on the Zach Braff train.
But yeah, so that is Cha Cha Real Smooth. Everybody see it once it's available because it's great. All right. Moving on, the next film on the list is a little film called Emergency, which won the Waldo Salt Screenwriting Award in the U.S. Dramatic category. And essentially, this is the story of two best friends who are about to finish college, and their goal is to they're trying to work together to make it on the wall first and be the first people of color at this college to have completed this round robin of these 7 epic parties that take place, I guess, on the same time every year. And as they go off to complete this wild night, they both have to deal with the fact that one of the friends has a science project that may be in jeopardy as far as surviving the night. And also they find a passed out white girl in their home and have to figure out what to do to deal with the situation. I thought this film was pretty great. This is, at its base level, this film is the answer to a tweet, right? Like the idea of like, hey, these One Wild Night films would be wildly different if the lead characters were not white kids, and like, you know, any person of color would have a far harder, more difficult time dealing with any of these like One Crazy Night films that everybody goes to the movie theater and laughs their ass off. And this film is sort of the answer to that. Like, what if we take that premise and put it through its logical paces? And it's basically just a comedy about two friends. But I think as the film progresses through, it's still maintaining its funny atmosphere throughout, but it also becomes more and more serious towards the end and starts to really examine the life of these two best friends and their different upbringings and how they both have a different sort of understanding and experience of what the Black experience is. And it sort of plays them against each other. And I think where this film ends, specifically at the last shot, is like a really, really compelling, sudden little stamp on the end of this film that sort of like, you get why this film is made from this shot, and it sort of is all one progression, and it's enjoyable throughout, but it really has all the weight and feeling stacked towards the end. And by the end of it, I was like, all right, that was pretty great. What did you think, Stephen?
I agree with you. I think this movie was pretty great. I don't think it was like fantastic, but I think it was very, very clever. I understand why it won a screenwriting award in particular, because I think what is very impressive about this movie is the way it manages to fold so many things together into a story that still grips you from beginning to end. I mean, it's a semi-raunchy buddy comedy a la Superbad. That's definitely how it feels at the beginning.
Yeah.
It is a interrogation of race that at first feels like it is going to just be irreverent. You know, it plants seeds very early on in the movie, in a way where it just kind of comes right out and tries to make the audience uncomfortable, and then tries to kind of laugh at the discomfort of the audience in a way that I think tees up what you're going to be going through. It becomes a tense, zany thriller. It becomes blind spotting in places, like very emotional and personal, and grappling with police brutality and how others see Black people, and interrogating white people, kind of interrogating their own implicit bias. It is doing a lot of things, and the fact that it knows how to swerve between all of them in a way that doesn't feel, it never grinds to a halt to say, okay, now we're going to get to the serious part. Like it is so confident in how it jumps back and forth between laughter and very serious themes, that I think that is just a brilliantly crafted script at play. I like this much, much, much more than the director Carey Williams' last Sundance movie that I saw, #J, which was the Romeo and Juliet movie taking place exclusively on, I want to say Instagram stories, but maybe it was Snapchat. I don't remember. This has a whole lot more going for it, but it has the same kinetic energy that made me intrigued by the Romeo and Juliet movie. Here, I think the kinetic energy works very well because it is in a kind of drama, comedy, thriller. Early in the movie, I don't know if I'm crazy, I felt like it was even going to become like a sci-fi apocalyptic-y like it does some things with the stakes early on in the movie that kind of steer you in a direction that it maybe isn't going to go.
I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Involving viruses.
Okay.
But anyway, I just think this movie has so much energy and it channels it in a way that is meaningful. I think it's a little abrasive sometimes. Like, it makes some of the young people be so annoyingly wrong so often. Like, occasionally I just wanted to yell at the movie and be like, I get it, move on to something else. But mostly I thought this was like a really, really, really great movie and a clever combination of things. It was a clever embellishment of that tweet that you said. All right. So let's move on to the movie that won the directing award in the World Cinema Dramatic category. And that is a film called Klondike. Klondike is a Ukrainian film that tells the story of basically a couple who are living in a war zone. It is based in a real time in the sense that it kind of revolves around that Malaysian Airlines flight that was shot down over a contested area of Ukraine when there was a separatist movement that was basically in a battle, and this airline was shot down supposedly unintentionally. And this movie is kind of using that as a backdrop to explore what would it feel like to live in a place like this, where everyone is fighting a proxy war. You know, there are people who are separatists who, want to leave Ukraine and go back and be closer to Russia. There are people who want to stay as a part of Ukraine. There are also Chechnyan rebels who I think maybe have their own agenda too, but none of these people are actually going to get power, right? They've all just allied themselves with a thing that they think will give them something in the end. And in the middle of this is a couple who are having a baby, and the wife just wants to have a kid and have her place and have everyone shut the hell up and get out of the way. And then, like, this movie opens with a couple having a conversation in the house. You know, the husband comes in and tells her, like, hey, let's go for a drive. I got a hospital set out for you. And then a bomb explodes half their house, and then the credits come up. And that is kind of the tone of this whole movie. It is horrific things happening all around them, and kind of the banality of war. Like, even when you are in the middle of something that you know is not going to end well. Like, there's danger outside. People are fighting each other. People are targeting willy-nilly based on semi-heard information they had. You still are going to squabble as a husband and wife. You know, you still have to make food. You still have to figure out what you're going to do. When the baby comes, you still need to, when a bomb blows up your wall, you have to put together brick by brick and just rebuild the house and be annoyed about it. I think this movie is it is bleak, but in this kind of also darkly funny way. I found it to be a very, very interesting movie. It made me wish I knew more about Ukrainian politics. It felt kind of timely because Ukraine is again back in the news now over similar agitation from Russia and the split between Putin's sympathizers and people who want to stay as a part of Ukraine. This movie doesn't really spoon feed any of it to you. It kind of just thrusts you in the middle of it and assumes that you will figure it out as it goes. And it worked well for me. I wished I knew a little bit more about it, but I thought the mix of drama and extremely bleak kind of black humor that it wrung from real life war and the real life tragedy that was happening as a part of it, and kind of the meaninglessness of a bunch of people fighting over a plot of land when none of them has any stake in it beyond the hope that maybe if they were on the right side, they'll be rewarded for it when the new landlord comes in. I thought that all worked very, very well. So I was a fan of Klondike. I liked it.
I don't share your love for this film, Stephen. It's interesting, like that. I think part of why I didn't really connect to this film is my lack of like historical knowledge of the subject matter and my confusion over what is, like, so when this opens, I think it was maybe the director who introduced the film in a little like video chat before it started, and she talked about how they are a tiny little studio, and you know they made this with like very little money and very little help, and they kind of made it. And I think that is really on display, right? This feels like the way the tragedy of Macbeth is supposed to feel like it's on a stage and in the real world. This feels like it is sort of like that. Like the entire thing is condensed and set on this one little plot of land, and they're theoretically the battlefield is just over the hill right there, and that's why like a stray bomb can come flying in and hit everything. But there's never, I never got the feeling that the war was real and could be seen. Like, you know, when you watch old movies about like the Civil War and it's like a family eating dinner, and then all of a sudden you just hear like the stuff going off, and then pretty soon there's like a battle that's just in the field out in front of the house and stuff. Like,
yeah,
this film doesn't have that. It just has things that randomly explode, and the husband is not around, suddenly comes up real fast and goes, "We got to get to the basement." And then there's shots from inside the basement of stuff like the roof shaking and sounds of explosions. But like, I never understood what was happening and how close to the battle lines they were and who was fighting what. And when there is a character who keeps coming in and out who is related to the wife, and she keeps saying, are you part of the, I forget what it says. So it's, I don't know if it's a resistance or if it's a different thing, but it's like, I don't even know. Like, I think you're Ukrainian, so you must be asking if he is on the side of the Russians. But like, I never really understood this conflict, who was playing what parts. And whenever the soldiers would come to the house and just take it over for 5 minutes, then leave, I never understood what they were doing other than they were hungry and they came to the house real fast. And there are things that happen while somebody has left like a 50 caliber machine gun just on the kitchen table. And it seems like those shots don't feel logically cohesive to me, where like soldiers would just leave weapons in an area where people are scared of soldiers, but nobody ever has the thought to try to do anything about the interaction. I just never understood. To me, I felt like I was missing something. Like this film feels incredibly personal and probably accurate to the way it felt to live this, but it also feels like I don't know a better word than Cliff Notes. Like, it's an abbreviated form of what it actually feels like. And you're supposed to get on this flip of a dime or whatever, like you're supposed to get this sudden tragedy or sudden awkwardness or the weirdness of two guys fighting, even though it's like when a bomb hasn't gone off, people act as though there's no war happening. But as soon as a bomb goes off, they act as though there's a million bombs going off. And it's like, maybe it feels like that, maybe it doesn't. I just, to me, I had a disconnect from what was happening. And the other problem I had too is these characters never sold me on why their house was so important. They didn't have a lot. The house itself was no longer sustaining them as a house because half the house got blown away. And I was not convinced that, because like the brother can just come and go wherever he pleases, and they seem to have family members who are in at least a better part of the town, I was never convinced that they had anything here that was worth staying this close to the wall. And maybe that was just a translation issue for me, that it wasn't picking up on it. But for me, I lacked the why stay here feeling of why you have to stay and protect this home and risk all that you are risking. And that sort of...
Yeah, so what's interesting is my read on the film, because I didn't do any research other than remembering the Malaysian Airlines flight story when it happened. I also am not that familiar with it. My read on this film is that it isn't meant to be a reflection of this is how it felt, that it's supposed to be a kind of a heightened version that emphasizes how meaningless war like this feels. Like, yeah. I think the world this movie is presenting is there is a hypothetical war going on. There are separatists, which means this eastern Ukrainian region wants to leave Ukraine and either become its own independent nation or join in with Russia in some capacity. I don't remember which is which. But usually, like, the separatists are speaking Russian and the pro-Ukrainians are speaking Ukraine, like the people who want to stay together, who do not want this separation to occur. I think there is no battle in the movie at all near people. What there is are two factions that are trying to hunt each other down, like sniff each other out. And in this case, in the beginning of this movie, I think a house is targeted because of a person who is staying in that house without remembering who else is staying in that house, because they are trying to target the people who are aggressors in this situation are the separatists, by and large, the people who want to leave. They're the people who kind of the main character, the man, has allied himself with for reasons his wife finds fucking annoying, you know, of like, why are you hanging out with these people? This sucks, right? Yep. What are you doing? I think the separatists are trying to target sympathizers of the Ukrainian regime. And the whole saga that the movie is about is the fact that this house has both of those at the same time. And I think it's supposed to be a kind of absurd fight when neither of them are actually going to win anything. They're all just going to get fucked over by this idea of war. And that was kind of how I saw the story.
But so let me ask you this then. So assuming, taking what you're saying and then rethinking the very first scene of the film, I could make the assumption that he knew that was probably happening. He was trying to get her to leave and go to the hospital early so that they would be away from the house, right? Let's say I'm 100% on board with that. Why, after it blows up, would they stay? Because if they really wanted him dead, wouldn't they still continue to shoot stuff at the house?
They want his brother-in-law or whoever that other person is dead. The
brother of his wife.
He's on the same side as the people who blew up his house. Okay. That's what I think we're supposed to believe. And the house getting blown up was an accidental targeting without thinking about it, much like the Malaysian Airlines flight was a targeting without thinking about it. Okay. That's how I understood the movie, at least. And not at first. It was only like halfway through when he's talking to people and they're vaguely apologetic. But that's why this is all like, oh, don't worry, we're going to be great when the new regime comes. You just get on board. You've allied with the right people. We have access. We can let you cross borders. We can do anything. And it turns out nobody gives a shit about you. I think that's kind of the story of the movie. Don't ally yourself with anything because nobody gives a shit and you're just going to suffer for it.
Yeah. Cool. All right, well, moving on. This is, we're going to be talking about the big film that everyone's talking about, which is a little film called Nanny, which won the U.S. Grand Jury Prize in the dramatic category. So it might be something people have been hearing about. But essentially, it is about this woman who is Senegalese, and she is here in the United States, and she is taken a job as a nanny for a family, and she was trying to save up enough money to bring her son over to the United States to live with her here. And as she, goes about working for this family, she starts to sort of have these moments of sort of, like visions or fugue state that she goes into where she sees different flashes of different things. And she is just slowly unwinding as she tries to painfully work towards saving up enough money to bring her son over. So this is the film that I think is very interesting and very compelling, and it has an ending that makes me dislike it completely. Like you joked about, I think you were joking about Cha Cha Real Smooth having like 4 different endings. This film crams 5 different endings into about 30 seconds right at the end.
Yeah.
And I to me, that was sort of a bridge too far, like especially in a film that felt as fantastical as things are happening, it still felt very grounded in the experience this one woman has moving forward. And as they start to introduce sort of mysticism and sort of steer the film into the horror genre, I think they become more concerned with playing within the tropes of the horror genre at the expense of a cohesive narrative that makes all the things that you're seeing gel together in a way that actually makes sense. I think this is like 75% beautiful story, beautiful filmmaking, and then 25% we overdid it a little bit because we wanted people to be really drawn in by the visuals of what's being shown. So to me, I enjoyed the film. I thought it was good, but I think it lost me right at the end because it kind of wanted to have its cake and eat it too.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. The ending, it didn't bother me, mainly because horror movies in general, and I should put an asterisk after the word horror here, because this movie is really not trying to be scary. This is much more just a movie with some psychological touches that can make you realize that, not everything is as it appears. But it's certainly not a movie that is trying to get you with jump scares or creep under your skin or anything like that. But in general, in those genres, I feel like sticking the landing is hard and almost never happens. I feel like usually I find the ending of a story like this a little unsatisfying, and I just bake that in with the territory when I go in to watch a film like this. I was very pleasantly surprised because I didn't want it to be a horror movie.
Yeah.
So I thought the story, of Anna, the nanny, who's like living in the Bronx and commuting, who's trying to earn money for her son. The interactions between her and the family that she is nannying for, I thought were like perfectly done. I thought it was great. It shows a lot about, the immigrant experience. There's a moment where she goes to the park with her kid and she sits down, and it is a bunch of other like black immigrants from different places, like Afro-Caribbean, and she's Senegalese, and I forget, there was another person too who I think they made a point of highlighting, where they're all together watching a bunch of white kids in the park, and there's this whole world wrapped around that disparity, and I think it's just ripe for turning into a kind of psychological horror, and I think it does a really good job with that. I thought the look and feel of this movie was very beautiful. It does a lot with like different colored lights. Like there's purple lights and green lights and really dark scenes, and then suddenly really bright, like almost overexposed when they're outside. I thought this was a movie that was very like mesmerizing to watch. So I can see why it got the acclaim that it did, because I imagine the creator did a lot with, I imagine, not a very big budget, but it looks fantastic.
Yeah, the biggest budget was renting that apartment.
Yeah, for sure. I want to live in that place. I would be much better than that.
Yeah.
But the movie has a big, I would have voted for Obama a third term energy to it. The Get Out feeling of people who fancy themselves as being progressive and all about like protest and support, and it needles at you a few times. There's a party scene where we hear the conversations that are happening in the background, and it is very cringy to listen to. I think all of that is just brilliantly done. I like the dash of mysticism. I think between this and Saloom, it's just interesting to see like this like Western African twist on horror tropes, the specific legends maybe that I wouldn't have seen before, and how that plays into the imagery that haunts people. I enjoyed that. I thought it was well done.
And just for the record, I enjoyed that. I think it branches out. There is something that is experienced by another character in the film who is not a part of this, but is seemingly somehow connected. And that is purely horror film trope, that entire half of this line, and what that character says about what they have experienced. If you take those words at fact, you let's just say that I take this film at its word, and that is true. What this experience is 100% that. Now apply that to the last 30 seconds of this, and it completely doesn't make any sense why the character's state of mind in those last shots, the person who is being shown, would be in the state they are, right? Because
we're talking around it, but I agree with you, and I totally get that. I think this movie is channeling in very interesting symbolism, and the real, completely non-mystical story it's telling is fantastic, except for the fact that it has too many endings.
Yeah.
But when it tries to tie everything together, I think the third act kind of falls apart. That was how I felt as well. I thought it looked good enough doing it that it didn't bother me, but I definitely didn't think it stuck the landing.
And a lot of those extra stuff that they add towards the end, I could just wave my hand away and be like, I don't care, this was great. My real problem is, and I'm trying to think of a film that is completely unrelated that I can do an analogy for, that would not be a spoiler for this film. But let's just say that there is a big dump of information that happens right towards the end of this film, and it is significant. And I think the montage you see at the end basically says that information I just found out about completely doesn't matter. And to me, that felt like a real sharp turn to feeling okay about something that I wouldn't feel okay about, if that makes sense.
I did feel like a little bit of that was about just the cycle of pain that people have to endure. Like, I thought some of that was intentional, maybe, a kind of life is pain story that was maybe supposed to be depressing, how it just kind of feels like history is repeating itself. But I feel you too. I thought the way it ended kind of undercut the rest of the message of the movie.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. So the next film is Navalny. This film won the Audience Award in the U.S. documentary section, and then it also won the Festival Favorite Award, so it was quite beloved by a number of people. And this is a documentary around Alexei Navalny, who was a Russian opposition leader who was kind of famously poisoned. And this is a movie that kind of talks through that process. And if I'm not saying much about it, it's because I wound up not watching it. So I'm hanging Christopher out to dry and making him talk about it all by his lonesome.
I think this is a film that Stephen was kind of excited to see. It might have just been because you were hearing good buzz about it. But I've said multiple times on the podcast that around festival times, I'm usually not wanting to burn a slot in the festival on a documentary unless it's going to be something that's really impactful or something super, super interesting. And I think that this film, I really enjoyed watching Navalny. Not necessarily because it's kind of like the documentary is really just look how fucking charismatic this guy is, and isn't he cool? And the answer to that question is yes, he's pretty dope. Like I had an amazing fun time watching him. Also, I want to say he looks like a combination of Ray Fiennes and Armie Hammer smashed together.
Two of the best people.
But that's just neither here nor there. Well, it's both places. But the meat of this documentary is about how they actually found out that he was for sure poisoned and where the poisoning came from and the process of how that went. I remember in the news when this was happening, I remember him being poisoned. In my head, I went like, that's wild. And then I sort of put it out of my mind and didn't really think about it. This film is really just, what is great about watching this is watching the scene where they get the information from the person they get it from and how they get it. So like, I really like that. It was kind of like mind-boggling how this happens. And the fact that Navalny is the one who gets the information is just fucking brilliant. It's amazing. This documentary is so fun. I don't know that it's substantively anything special, but it was fun. And in a weekend where I was shoving in so many things, it was like, I'm going to start my Sunday morning with this film. And I was like, yeah, I'm in a good mood to watch some other films because this is friggin' awesome.
Nice. Well, I'm glad. I would have been much more mad at myself if you hated it, because these last two movies are both ones that we added because I suggested them because we had two films left and we weren't feeling very strongly about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a CNN HBO production, so it's slated to air early this year. So it will be available to watch soon, and I'll definitely catch up with it.
Yeah. It's a hard, like, it wouldn't be one that we would do like a full review for or anything, because it's really just like, yeah, he's super charismatic, and it sucks that he was poisoned, and oh my god, that was amazing how he got the information about how he was poisoned. Which is, it's not breaking the news either. You're just watching it. You're just watching somebody, like, it's like you're out for drinks and somebody's like, you will not believe how this happened, let me tell you. And that's the equivalent of what you're watching. Like, this could be.
So this isn't like an Icarus type movie where it stumbles into an amazing thing. This is just recounting an amazing thing.
I mean, technically, so there were people making a documentary about him, and then he got poisoned. And it's basically like one nerd guy who is like, let me buy a bunch of like flight manifests from the deep web and then just like cross-reference them. And here's a bunch of people we should call and try to get them to admit it. And like, you're just watching that process. But it's like, this part of the documentary is like 15, 20 minutes. And the rest of it is just like, isn't he fun to be around? It's like, it shouldn't be as good as it is, but it looks slick. Just like there's scenes where they're interviewing him in a bar, and the setup, it's just fucking rad. Like the main shot for the header for the image on the Sundance page is like sort of this interviewing stuff they're doing before this happens, and it looks cool, and I had a fun time watching it.
Nice.
There's also this great moment in the documentary where he's like, look, we didn't even believe I could have been poisoned, because it would have been stupid if Putin did poison me, because it's like his poison. He's the only one that uses it. If I died from that poison, it's unbelievable that it could have been him, because it would be too on the nose for it to be him. It's good. So on to the last film. It's another one that Stephen didn't end up catching. I did catch it. This is a film that, if you've heard anything about it, you've probably heard that it's a very uncomfortable film to watch. It is about a 17-year-old girl who runs across a 34-year-old man, and the friendship that they start to form together, if I can say that. And it's really just a film that starts uncomfortable and just builds in its uncomfortableness till the end. And it feels like a film that's very much trying to communicate the dangers of certain situations. And I think that this is not a film that is about this isn't like maybe not the best comparison now, but it's not like Call Me by Your Name, where it's like, yeah, there's an age difference, but like blah 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 blah, you're kind of rooting for them even though you shouldn't be. This is like, you're never rooting for it. It's an uncomfortable situation. You know it's bad, and it just continues to get worse. And I think that it's kind of a weird film, because it's like the film is definitely talking about the dangers of one thing, and then kind of its thesis is the very last line of dialogue before the credits roll. And I think that it's like, where this film is going is darker than like maybe you're expecting as you go into the film. And it left me with a weird feeling, because it felt like I didn't know why this story needed to be told. And it felt like that last line of dialogue is why this story didn't need to be told. And I'm not sure what that line of dialogue is saying about hope in society and and like where things are.
I'd be curious, because I think this is one of those movies that the director made a short a few years ago that was relatively acclaimed, and then got funding to turn it into a feature length. And the short was also called Palm Trees and Power Lines.
Yeah.
If I'm pulling this out of my ass completely, I'm sorry, but I feel like that happened.
I feel
and so
like
I can imagine if it hinges on a line of dialogue, I can imagine in a like 12-minute movie how maybe that could all come together in a way that a 2-hour drama, it doesn't feel quite as cohesive.
Well, it's like the line of dialogue out of nowhere sums up the character's state of mind, having been through stuff. And it's making a comment based on what the state of mind is, that is not necessarily the story you were watching, but the culmination of how going through stuff can affect you. I don't even know if that's ambiguous enough, but but yeah, it just left me in a weird place by the end of it, wondering what I had watched and what the future holds for any character that you've seen over the course of the film. So yeah, definitely not a feel good film. And it's an incredibly comfortable film to watch, and would be really weird to be watching and have people walk in the room while you're watching it.
Now, one thing I'm curious about is because everyone describes it as uncomfortable, and that is different from sad. Like when they say uncomfortable, it makes me think that it is portraying this in a way where it is wrong and terrible, but it isn't playing all the drama notes of you should feel terrible, and that would be the uncomfortable part. Like, is it playing this directly and trying not to comment?
So there's three things, 4 things. There's 3 things. One of them is spoilers, so I won't actually say it. But first of all, the first thing is that this is not a person who, this isn't like a hard candy situation where somebody has lured this person from afar and now they are in the shadows engaging in whatever situation they're going to engage in. This is 2 people, one who's 17, one who's 34, laying against each other on a beach full of people, and it's just normalized because nobody is commenting on it or saying. There's one point in the film where a waitress, like, he goes out to take a phone call and the waitress approaches her and like tries to check in to see if she's okay, but besides that, no one bats an eye, and they're clearly not father-daughter, right? They are romantically like their first couple of interactions are like sitting on the back of his truck, parked along railroad tracks where you're like away from other people, right? So it's like semi-private. But then they're like going on dates in public to the beach, to like different places, and it feels very, very not on the down low, very public. Everything's fine and nobody seems to care or get bothered to it. That's the first uncomfortableness. The second uncomfortableness is prolonged scenes where they are engaged together. That is just makes you wonder about like who the acting supervisor was to like make sure those scenes were okay for the actors involved. And like, there's a lot of things that call into question, like just filming this feels strange and awkward. And then the third things are just how dark the actual story goes by the end. And that's as much as I'll try to say to that. But yeah, it's just, it's not a film where you are trying not to think about how awkward the situation is. It's a film where you're constantly thinking about it and you're questioning why nobody else in this universe seems to think about it. Right. And then you're forced to sit through prolonged scenes that are supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. But it's not like I don't know. It just always feels wrong. and it's hard to, it's just uncomfortable.
Interesting. Like this conversation.
Yeah. I will say the one thing that would have been enjoyable is it's clearly in San Diego because they talk about like at one point she said she's like seeing a guy from another school and they're like, oh, he goes to Vista or whatever. And they talk about Carlsbad, I think, too. And I was like, all right, so where are we exactly? And then I think they go to Mission Bay at one point. I'm not 100% certain. I was trying to look for landmarks. I couldn't find them. And that was part of the game of watching this. Is like, okay, hold on. Show me an actual building that I recognize. And maybe I can figure out what part of the city they're in. But
nice.
Yep. At least there was that. All right. So, any last thoughts on this festival as a whole, Stephen?
I don't know. I mean, I would say of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the movies we talked about that I saw, I at least liked. I liked all of them, and I would say I quite liked at least 4 of them. So I feel like at least from the awards contenders, Sundance is batting a pretty high average, I feel. I feel relatively impressed given how few things we were able to catch.
Yeah. I was pretty high on 4 of them. I think you would have had a 5 if you got to see Navalny.
I will. I know I'm going to see that. Joanna's a sucker for documentaries too. When I realized it was coming out like very soon, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna rush for it.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's our conversation. I would say quick, but this is like longer than most of our recent reviews have been.
Yeah.
That makes sense. We had a lot to cover. But yeah, so that was our conversation on this. So Stephen, if people want to find you throughout the week, where can they do that?
People can find me at twitter.com/sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
All right. If people want to find me, they can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or twitter.com/ChristopherIRL. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so in Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at twitter.com/spoilerwarning, facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from the Jingle to the Sundance 2022 Film Festival. I wrote it weird.
It feels wrong that we're 2022. I don't like it.
Yeah, well, but yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that. Next weekend, A24 Screening Room is having Red Rocket playing, so we'll do that. So that's the next review you'll see from us. The week after that, I'm going to make Steven watch Kimmy, the new Soderbergh film about Alexa trying to kill people.
Cool.
Which should be great. Yeah, and then we're gonna see. You know, we're still not really returning to theaters with Omicron going all crazy, so we're kind of playing it by ear every week. Who knows what kind of extra stuff will come out? You know, maybe some festival stuff we missed will start coming out. Yeah, we'll be back with more episodes this year, and here's the 2022.
Here's the 2022. Oh, and I did do my finally best of 2021 list, which is actually 24 movies, which is way too many movies to write about. But you can go to my website, sdavidmiller.com, if you want to read all about a whole bunch of other shit. And that is the last I'm going to say about that.
All right. Cool. See everybody next time. Later.
Bye.